welcome back to the Critic-Verse. Today, we're going to be talking about Superman Lois, Season 3, Episode 2, titled Uncontrollable Forces. Before we get to the breakdown, I really appreciate it if you could like, comment, and subscribe to help the channel grow and be a part of the Critic-Verse. Now, let's get to the video. Lois goes in for her doctor's examination, and the entire scene goes without dialogue through the examination, to Lois lying awake beside Clark, to eating out with her family, and watching her husband and Chrissy work. Then finally getting the results of her testing back, and it doesn't look like it's good news. After the title card, the boys come downstairs complaining about still having to study, despite the school being shut down because of the mold. Then Lois agrees with Clark, even though she's zoned out for most of what he said. Jonathan suggests that they don't have to study there, which Jordan remarks he just wants to drive his truck, and he throws it right back at Jordan with his flying. Their bickering annoys Clark to the point where he asks them to leave, and Lois wants them to be back before dark. Clark notices Lois zoning out, and it seems Lois used her dad as an alibi for her doctor's appointments, but she still manages to play it off. Clark brings up the false positive they got in last week's episode and says if they really want to try, but Lois shuts it down, saying it was a nice fantasy, but their lives are already full. Clark flirts with the idea of checking out another one of Tal's vacation homes, but Lois says Chrissy wants them at the Gazette. Next, Sarah and Nat are at the diner, and Sarah is asking Natalie about past boyfriends or even crushes. But given the world she came from, there probably wasn't a lot of time to date. Since there's no school, Sarah suggests they look up Natalie's old crush to see if he exists on this earth. He does, and he's having a party in Metropolis. Natalie is also revealed to be doing a project for the DoD, even though her dad says he wants her to be a more normal teenager. The boys then enter the diner, and after an awkward bit of conversation with Jordan, they don't tell the boys about the party and rush off saying they have girl stuff. Chrissy informs Lois and Clark that Adam Man's petition to be released was rejected by the same judge 3 times, but she changed her mind on the 4th, Judge Tara Reagan. Chrissy set up an interview with the judge for Lois under the guise of judiciary reform. Clark, noting it as an ambush, which Chrissy says Lois is fine with it, and she is, and she's already ready to go. Chrissy and Clark find it a little bit odd, considering Lois hasn't even given her thoughts on the editor's column. Clark offers to go with her for a classic Lois and Clark team-up, to which Lois joked about a bad fumble Clark had a couple years back, but agrees just to cut down travel time. At the Irons house, Nat tells her dad about the party. He gives her the standard questions about who she's going with, will there be drinking, will there be boys, and Nat gives him all great answers, to which he allows her to go, because he does want her to be a normal teenager. Sarah, however, doesn't tell her mom about the party. Instead, she says she's doing a movie marathon at Natalie's place, but Lana gets distracted by a call from George Dean. On the phone, George sounds distressed, and it switches back and forth between his location and Lana's. We see George being attacked by onomatopoeia, and on the phone, he says he made a mistake, and it was all about the pride of Smallville, which he makes an emphasis on. And then we hear the sounds of the attack, and then him dying. Onomatopoeia sees and destroys his phone. Lois and Clark are then shown waiting for the judge. Clark notices Lois seems off again, but she deflects back to the Henry Miller situation and wonders where the judge is. Just then, the judge shows up, saying they arrived earlier than her assistant thought they would, probably because Clark flew them there. Lois then brings up Henry Miller just as the judge walks in, and the judge is shocked, but it cuts to the next scene, where the boys get home, and it turns out Eliza, John's ex from the first episode, invited him to a party in Metropolis, which is most likely the same party Sarah and Nat are going to crash. John wants to go, and he wants Jordan to come with him. Jordan says they would never make it there and back before dark in the truck, and John says they won't do it in a truck, but they can do it if they fly. Jordan questions the logistics of how he'd carry John, but he tells Jordan that Jordan needs to move on from Sarah, and the only way to do that is by actually talking to other girls. Which other girls will be at the party, which would also make it easier for him to be friends with his ex, which John thinks he is now. At the crime scene, Chrissy is questioning Kyle about what happened to the former mayor, and Chrissy recounts the first time she met Mayor Dean, which makes Kyle do the math on their age difference, which does make Chrissy laugh a bit. Lana shows up to the scene, and Kyle asks how she's holding up, but Lana focuses on Sarah because Sarah used to be friends with the mayor's son. At the party, Sarah and Nat find Nat's multiverse crush, and it turns out that he's in a relationship in this universe. John and Jordan also get there, and John swallowed a bug on the way there. Liza greets John and ignores Jordan and asks John to talk alone, so John advises Jordan to wait for him inside and just to talk to one girl. Nat and Sarah chill by the pool, and Sarah notices a guy constantly checking out Nat. After, Nat just wants to leave and pushes the guy to come over and talk to her. His name is Mateo, and he was working up the nerve to talk to Nat the whole time. Jordan is then shown trying to work the party, introduce himself to some other girls, but it's not actually working for him. He then sees Sarah and tries to silently back away, only to bump into and spill a drink on some douche, and kind of makes a scene which Sarah notices and confronts him. Back at the courthouse, the judge is about to leave when Clark advises her to tell her side of the story before their article goes out. She says that she recalled his sentence because of his terminal cancer. Lois then reveals to the judge that Henry survived months after that he thought he was and had gotten superpowers, and that it was him fighting Superman last week, to which the judge seems shocked, but who knows what she was really thinking. Clark hears her heart rate speed up and asks if she's alright, and Lois asks if she was pressured to release Henry Miller when men in black suits come in to end their interview and remove Lois and Clark, and also give the judge a phone. Lois and Clark then stake out the courthouse, and Clark knows something is bothering Lois and tells her he's here whenever she's ready to talk. But Lois just wants him to follow the fixer who got them removed. Back at the party, Mateo and Nat are hitting it off. It seems he told her an embarrassing story about a horror movie they both like, which seems to be something that they share an interest in. Mateo is really feeling Nat and reveals he noticed her on her one and only day at Metropolis High at the beginning of Season 2 and wishes she never left. John and Liza are talking, and she gives John a gift and wants to talk to him somewhere more private. Sarah gives Jordan her flannel to cover up the spill on his shirt and tries to make it seem like he wasn't avoiding her, saying that he was just giving her space, to which she says he doesn't have to do that, but that's kind of contradicting what she said in the previous episode. She says she wants to be friends with Jordan, best friends in fact, and they shake on it and they decide on playing the same party douches John spilled the drink on in water pong, which they'll only play water pong if they put up some money. Sarah and Jordan dominate at water pong in kind of a fun teen movie montage of them playing. But back in Smallville, Lana finds out that Sarah lied to her when she shows up at the Irons house to go get her. John Henry thought Lana knew, and Lana flips out on John Henry even though Sarah was the one that lied to her. John Henry tries to comfort her, saying that Nat promised they'd be back by midnight, and Lana apologizes for blowing up at John Henry but he invites her in for dinner, saying that he made more for just one person. Back in Metropolis, Lois hears a commotion and sees Judge Reagan is on the roof and is about to do something drastic, but Lois goes up to talk her down. Lois talks to the judge, and the judge says that once she heard Lois's question about Henry Miller, she knew that her life was over. Next, Clark followed the fixer and listens in from above. He works for Bruno Mannheim, and Bruno Mannheim asks about Lois, to which the fixer notes that Lois has nothing. And then Bruno gets an alert and video that Superman is flying above them. The fixer then apologizes for being followed. Bruno calls Superman down and asks him what he's doing there and what he wants. Jeez, the balls on this guy. Clark asks why he had Atom Man release. Bruno asks why he cares, to which Clark brings up Henry had powers that he never had before. Bruno asks him if he's threatened that someone else had powers, but also what that has to do with him. When Superman directly accuses him of it, he asks for proof and says he's always being accused of things. Clark brings up he's often accused of being the head of Intergang, which Bruno calls that an ugly rumor. Superman was the one that brought Henry into his neighborhood, but now he's accusing him of playing Frankenstein. Clark notes that he hasn't denied anything yet, to which Bruno counters that people always make him the villain, but in these parts of Metropolis, he's actually the hero and not Superman. Back at the courthouse, Lois is talking Judge Reagan down, but she says Lois doesn't understand, and Judge Reagan says the system is rigged and some people are too powerful to stop, and stands while Lois pleads that she can help. Back in Smallville, Lana and John Henry are enjoying dinner, noting how good it was despite being vegan. And John says it's because Nat is vegan, he learned a thing or two around the kitchen. She talks about George's last call and talked about the pride of Smallville. John Henry asks if that could be a clue, and Lana recognizes it from the seal in the mayor's office, and they leave to check it out. Back at the party, Eliza and John are talking, and she says she missed him and kisses him, to which he immediately pulls back because he's with Candace. But Eliza misunderstood his texting and coming to the party as interest, and John realizes his mistake and leaves. Jordan and Sarah win another game of water pong, and as she's collecting her money, her smack talk makes the guys start to get a little salty. Being bad sports, considering Jordan and Sarah are technically party crashing. They try trash talking Jordan because he's smaller than them, that he's wearing his girlfriend's flannel, and Sarah isn't too happy about that. And Jordan can't do much because he'll expose his secret. Meanwhile, outside, Nat and Mateo are talking about relationships. Nat mentions her interest in him, but they overhear the problem inside and go check it out. Sarah throws a drink in one of the guys' faces, and they all leave before things escalate any further. At the mayor's office, John Henry and Lana check out the seal and discover a hidden flash drive. When they try to see what's on it, Onomatopoeia shows up and wrecks the entire office with a sound wave, and then destroys the laptop. Bruno reveals why South Metropolis has its nickname, because people who grew up there had no hope, and that life had no hope. Then Bruno recounts how he used to watch as Lex Luthor and Morgan Edge got rich while his community suffered, and he transformed his community, and he gave people hope, not Superman, and says all Superman does is put out fires. He says Superman doesn't change anything, despite how long he's been on Earth. Just then, Superman hears the commotion going on the roof with Judge Reagan and Lois. The judge moves further onto the ledge. Lois holds back the police as she continues to plead with her. Clark hears this, and Bruno remarks that Clark just goes to put out another fire. Clark leaves, but not before Bruno tells him never to step foot in his house again and act like he's better than him, but he flies away anyway. Back on the roof, Judge Reagan says there's no hope. Lois remarks, knowing what that feels like. When the judge asks how, Superman shows up. But Lois reveals that she has an aggressive form of cancer, and she's been losing hope all day because she's scared. But the only way to combat that fear is to fight, and she wants the judge to fight with her. Then Judge Reagan steps down and hugs Lois, both bonded through a shared fear. The police escort the judge away while Lois waits for Clark, and the two hug, as Clark comforts his wife after overhearing. Back at the farm, Lois talks about all she's been keeping from Clark, and she tells him that she has inflammatory breast cancer, which is rare, aggressive, and hard to detect, so it's a miracle they even found it in the first place. She regrets not telling him sooner, but he reassures her that she has nothing to apologize for, but she begins to break down after explaining why she took so long to tell her. And he continues to comfort her. He promises her they're going to get through this and that she's no longer alone. Next, Sarah apologizes, but both Nat and John enjoyed what she did. Nat didn't get Mateo's number, but, spoiler, he is coming back, but more on that later. Jordan then lands and then pulls out his phone to show the group the video he made where he freezes the douchebag from the party's new truck. But Sarah gets a message and looks shocked. In the next scene, in Bruno Mannheim's hidden lab, Atom Man has to be terminated and is deemed a failure. Onomatopoeia returns and reveals what went down in Smallville and says John Henry Irons is alive, to which Bruno reveals that Onomatopoeia was the one that killed this world's John Henry, to which Onomatopoeia says she knows, but has a photo of John Henry still alive. After, Sarah and Nat get back to Lana's house, and John Henry is installing a new security system and says he'll finish up later. Lana then thanks John Henry for dinner, and he leaves. In the final scene, the boys arrive home and try to come up with an excuse, but shut up once they see the serious look on their parents' face. Lois asks them to sit, and Clark reassures them that they'll get through this together as a family. Lois then tells them that she was diagnosed with stage 3 inflammatory breast cancer. And most of her words echo in their heads, but you can see how much this is impacting them. And they get up and they hug their mom, and the episode ends on a somber note. Okay, this was a very touching episode. A great one, as it deals with a very real-world topic as the science fiction sort of floats in the background. This episode is titled Uncontrollable Forces, which references how the judge views the power Bruno Mannheim has, but also how Lois views the cancer that is now in her body. A couple of things about this episode that I want to talk about. I forgot how Lana and Sarah know about Clark and Jordan's secret, that they now also know about Nat and John Henry's secret too, but got reminded once Sarah mentions how Nat's crush might exist on this Earth as well. The boy that Nat does end up flirting with, Mateo, is actually revealed in the casting notes to be the son of this Earth's John Henry's sister. So that would make Mateo her multiversal cousin. So we do know that Mateo is coming back, but wonder how Nat will find out about this familial relationship between them. The scene where Jordan and Sarah deal with the Metropolis douches mirrors the scene where the Fixer gets rid of Lois and Clark, with Clark/Jordan having to act meek and Lois and Sarah being the more brash ones. One of the more forced aspects of the episode was Lana wanting to get Sarah because of George Dean's murder, especially after last season, because the family wasn't very fond of George Dean. That could best be explained by their compassion towards the people of Smallville, but it really didn't make much sense, but it was probably just to push Lana more in John Henry's direction. Henry Miller having brain cancer and the project Bruno was experimenting with, keeping him alive, may play into Lois's cancer storyline, but seriously, if Lois gets powers before Jonathan, I'm gonna lose it. On that note, the actor who plays Jonathan actually had to deal with this storyline in real life. When he was around Jonathan's age, his real life mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, but she did pull through and is doing well. I also think the episode started pretty well with Lois alone and mostly in her head, but then the episode also ends with her being blanketed by hugs from her sons. Okay, everyone, that's all I have on this week's episode. Don't forget to join me next week for another breakdown and review of Superman and Lois Season 3. See you next time on the Critic-Verse.